You're listening to Season 2 of Beyond Insights, your go-to podcast for all things accounting, business, and technology.
Unsure how to improve your leadership skills, or whether you're suited to being a leader to begin with? Looking for ways to build a stronger team or take better risks? Then stay tuned.
From cybersecurity, blockchain, and AI innovations to sustainability, employee retention, and work-life balance, we've got you covered.
We speak to knowledgeable and insightful guests from varied backgrounds, industries, and locations from all around the globe.
From this multiplicity of thought, we strive to find solutions to our most urgent business problems.
Whether you're a small business owner, an accountant, entrepreneur, or even a young professional looking to progress, this podcast is for you.
Thank you for tuning in. Let's dive right in and go beyond insights.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Beyond Insights podcast. Today, I'm very excited for the conversation we're about to have. I think a super important conversation to be had in workplaces, and so I'm very excited to introduce you to today's attendee for our podcast, Miriam. So a little introduction to Miriam. Miriam Owusu is an award-winning woman in tech and sales. She won the Young Businesswoman of the Year in 2024 and is a keynote speaker, mental health and wellbeing champion, DEI advocate, career coach, former account executive and SDR, as well as a law graduate. And ultimately, she's passionate about helping people grow and succeed. So today, we thought we'd cover the topic of mental health and inclusivity in the workplace. And while many organizations prioritize profits above all else, it is worth noting that it's the people in your business who help build those profits. And if they don't feel a sense of safety and belonging in the workplace, not only will this negatively impact their well-being, but it would also impact the success of your company. So with that in mind, let's dive into today's episode. So Miriam, very impressive background.
Thank
I
you.
do want to start off today's session on a lighter note so that the people can get to know you. So could you give us a little fun fact about yourself?
So fun fact, and before I start, let me backtrack. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And fun fact, I would say I played football from about 7 up until university, and now I just play casually.
Really?
Yeah.
That is a seriously fun fact. You've got yourself with someone who's also a massive football fan. I also play quite a bit of football myself, so that's a seriously fun fact, Miriam.
Amazing.
Support any teams?
Yes, the best football team in the world. So based in North London, Arsenal.
Oh, no. Miriam, fair enough. Listen, Arsenal is a team you'd want to be supporting right now, so fair enough. Completely fair. Okay, cool. So, let's get into things. So, with regards to the conversation we're going to be having today around mental health and, diversity and inclusion in workplaces, how do you personally prioritize mental well-being alongside productivity?
Yeah, I do it for a number of reasons. And I guess I do really want to go deep and just touch on some topics. So I actually went through depression last year, and it was a shock. It was difficult. And that was a real wake-up call for me to kind of be reminded of how to prioritize my mental health and well-being. And prior to that, I did, but they were almost like little periods. And then I'll burn myself out and then prioritize my mental health, right? And last year when I went through that period of depression, it was like, okay, let me just backtrack. So for me, the first thing is setting boundaries. So setting clear boundaries. And this could be, for example, having time where I focus on just self-care. So there's days, particularly on the weekend, where I may just, whether it's go for a walk or I may go and do a massage. I love a deep tissue massage. This is an interesting one, and some people may or may not be a fan of, but I go on dates, like solo dates,
Mhm.
So I walk in a restaurant and I'm like, table for one? And they're like, "Oh, table for two."
Nice.
I'm like, no, table for one. And in that time, no one will be disrupting me. So
Mhm.
nothing work related, nothing outside of that. It's just me time. So that's the first thing. I would say another thing now, which I do, is scheduling time to rest. So where I could
Nice.
just switch off.
Mhm.
So it's important. It's important as you know, there's a busy life and I do so many different things, but it's really important for me to just prioritize rest and make
Mm.
sure that I get my 7, 8 hours of sleep. So come 10, maximum 11 p.m., I'm shutting down. I
Mhm.
am shutting down. And it's very rare, unless it's an emergency, for even my family to get me at that point. So so that's another thing. And the final thing that I'm really big on is checking in with myself. So I have moments, I would say it could be weekly, but for me, I would say every single month where I check in to touch base. Like, how am I doing?
Yeah.
How are you? Do you need to give yourself more time to rest? Do you need to give yourself more time to prioritize whether it's the things that you love? So yeah, those are the kind of things that I really do to manage that productivity as well as prioritize my mental health and well-being.
I love that. I love that. I think lots of people will appreciate that as well. And thank you for being so open and telling us a bit of the backstory because it's important, you know. Lots of people will see the success, like I said, Businesswoman of the Year, they'll see everything that you do and how you help people out. But it's important to know that, you know, we're all going through these things at one point or another. And those are nice practical steps that people can use in their own lives to try and, you know, check in, make sure that their boundaries are set correctly. So yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that answer.
Thank you so
Cool.
much.
So again, just going back onto the mental health side of things. In your opinion, what role does mentorship and community play in supporting mental well-being for young professionals and entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah, this is something that I hold dear because I am very big on what I call my tribe. So those are
Mhm.
people within my professional network as well as personal network, and many of whom are mentors. So I've been blessed enough to have mentors along my journey. But I would say the first thing is guidance. So for me, I'm still young in my career journey, and with my mentors, they are able to help me navigate my next steps. Whether it's is there is there a way or direction that I need to go, and how could they inform me in the best way, given their journey, because they will be a
Mhm.
few steps ahead of me, and that particularly helps with sometimes that worry or a worry that could then turn into stress or anxiety
Mhm.
because you're fixated on knowing where to go next. So I think that is very key, having that mentorship and guidance around you. I would also say to add to that safe space. So
Mhm.
you may not be able to always go to your manager or sometimes even your colleagues about certain things, right? Like what do you want to do in the next 5 to 10 years? Like those are
Mhm.
discussions that are often had internally, but there may be some things that you want to just make sure that you just get a few eyes on that you trust and that advice. So for me, it's that safe space where
Yeah.
I don't need to front or I don't need to do anything. It's just like here you are.
Mhm.
So that's another thing. I would also say that validation. So a lot of the communities that I'm in, I I definitely feel like I belong. I feel,
Yes.
and it just kind of adds to that safeness. And having worked in the corporate environment, having worked in so many different areas of work, like I definitely know that you don't always feel safe in every environment that you're
Of
in,
course.
particularly at
Of course.
work.
Yeah.
So when you're in those environments of mentorship and support, you literally feel, for me anyway, you belong here.
Yeah.
So so that's that. And then a last thing is definitely accountability. So
Mhm.
for me, I have so many goals, so many visions, so many things that I'm always envisioning. But am I doing it?
Mhm.
Am I doing it? And when you have that support system or that mentorship, they can keep you on track. And one thing that I do now, which I didn't do before, is have those regular check-ins. So prior to me actually re-strategizing, I would touch base with some of my mentors like once every 6 months, but a lot can happen. You could
course.
fall off course or derail after a month or a week. So now it's a more regular opportunity to touch base and just be more real and honest. So
Yeah,
it's not always about the highs, like, oh yeah, I've done well. It's like, what have you
100%.
so you'll know, like, what have I struggled with and how can I bounce back? How can I re-strategize for the week and not allowing one setback to just knock me back? So having that accountability is often important to make sure that I can achieve what I need to achieve, whether it be for that quarter, that year in general.
Absolutely. And what are some of the biggest misconceptions you found about mental well-being and, diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, I would often say in terms of diversity and inclusion and even mental health just generally, but I'll touch on diversity and inclusion. It's almost like it's a nice to have. It's not a necessity. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily always embedded in the culture or the threads of a business. And that is huge, a huge misconception, because if you were to even look at the commercial aspect or how having a diverse team can impact a business's profit or productivity, there's so many studies that have proven the benefits of that. Let's say
Mhm.
even in the world of tech, like tech is the future, but if you don't have a diverse team, you could have a team that looks a certain way that's literally making all of these decisions to dictate where that product is going or where the future of tech is going. Meanwhile, the world is diverse. So
Mhm.
if you don't have that right team to make those informed decisions, then what is being birthed from that, from those ideas, right? So I think that's important. Businesses understanding that it's not a nice to have, it's a necessity for
Mhm.
the business's growth, their innovation, and let's be real, like that productivity and profitability element is key. And I think
Yeah.
now what I'm often seeing is, like, even working in the world of sales, like you deal with so many different people on the
Mhm.
receiving end. And for me, although I was born and raised in London, my background is Ghanaian. So
Mhm.
when I've encountered those from my country, right, Ghana, I'm able to speak in the language. So some clients may be in positions now where they are demanding, wanting to speak to someone who could speak the same language, or it could be Spanish, right? It could be French, it could be any language, but are your clients able to have those right people within the business to connect with them or to
Mhm.
understand their business needs or requirements, depending on what industries you're in? So I would say that's definitely another thing. I would also say another misconception about mental health and well-being is the onus is solely on the individual.
Mhm.
Like, employees should deal with it, no one else.
So
And I
true.
think I think that that's huge because we are at work more than where we're doing anything else in our life, particularly if you're an employee. So
Mhm.
it's, for me, I think the onus is on both parties, both the employer as well as the employee to prioritize it. So are you equipping your employees with the right tools? It could be little things. So for example, are your leadership team trained to pick up on mental health or well-being issues or signs? So some companies literally have mental health and well-being first aiders. So that's
Yeah.
one way. Benefits. Like, I know some companies who may have, for example, the ability to take the Friday afternoon off to spend time with your family or to do what you love. Like, that's feeding into your employees' life, like positivity. Like, what do you love to do and what could you focus on? So that's huge. So I think employers need to start looking at how they could start equipping their employees, their staff, with not only the education aspect, but tools that can help them both in and out of work. And I would say, like, another misconception or is that it's almost like, let's say with D&I or mental health and well-being, like it's just about being nice. Like,
Mhm.
that will resolve it. Just being
Yeah.
nice. Like, let's say if we're talking about uh ethnic minority in a workplace, like as long as you be nice to them, that will resolve everything. And it's more than just that. It's about that education piece that I've outlined. It's about that understanding. It's about that training. It's about how can you also look at these metrics? Is there a way to capture the data of, for example, how diverse the team is? And I don't do consulting in that area, but I know I've even spoken to businesses that don't have a way to even capture that data of how diverse their team is. So if you're then looking at, for example, leadership, you could be promoting anyone and everyone, but then when you take a step back, you're not building a diverse
Yeah.
leadership board. So it's things like that, that I would touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've actually touched quite nicely on the next question that I had. So I wanted to ask you, you know, lots of employees will hesitate maybe to speak about mental health because of the stigma that's associated with it. And you've come up with some nice suggestions there about how leaders can actually create an environment where people feel safe to speak up. But how do we get rid of that stigma? How do we actually, foster an environment where people feel like, you know what, I'm actually struggling today, and so I'd like to speak up about it?
Yeah. This is such an important point. I would say the first thing is having a culture where vulnerability is embraced rather than the opposite.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that, could you have leaders who do not just glamorize the day to day? Like, could they make it known to the team or to the company that some days are great, some days are not? And if you have that, if you start to nurture and create that kind of environment, then you'll find that that will trickle down to everyone and anyone. So even when individuals may not be having a good day, they can make that known. And the great thing about some environments that I've been in, like there could be some team members where they've literally come in not having a good day and they'll make it known. They'll be like, guys, I'm not having a good day.
Yeah.
And for example, obviously you've got the rule of leaving baggage outside, right? Before you step into the door, but we're all humans. And that may be something that may genuinely be impacting that individual. So could it mean that you could just be a bit more mindful of how you navigate around that certain individual on that particular day, or give them more grace? So that's key, modeling that vulnerability and creating that culture where individuals can be vulnerable. And that really start from leadership down.
100%. 100%. I was about to chime in there and say, absolutely, it starts from the top, right?
Yeah.
Those same practices, those same commonalities that help with productivity could also be applied to things like mental health and inclusion, As soon as
Right.
you've got a culture where I understand that it's okay for me not to be having a good day, but that's fine, I come into work 100 times better than if I'm too, like I said, scared. There's a bit of a stigma around the idea of speaking up. I think
Yeah.
you put the nail on the head there. As soon as those are implemented at the top, it makes it a lot easier for employees, for example, to be able to, speak up, voice their opinion on how they're feeling.
Absolutely. Exactly that. And that's
Mm.
the main thing, like empowering individuals at work to speak up and just be real and vulnerable, because ultimately employees or individuals at work are not just numbers, they are real
Yeah.
people. And it's about really humanizing it and for leadership to recognize that. And there are so many companies that are doing that amazingly. So it's to really give props to those kind of companies to just continue.
Yeah.
But for those who aren't, it's recognizing that you're dealing with employees and how can you better their experience. And even another point, like I know, and I know a lot of companies do struggle with sick days, or the number of individuals that do take sick leave. And could that be addressed by just really creating an environment where employees can be safe? Because it may be
Mhm.
that an employee may not be having a great day and they just think, okay, I can't be bothered to go to work. But to your point, if it is an environment where it's great, then they know I can go to work irrespective of whether I'm feeling 100% or not.
Yeah.
So that's key.
Yeah.
And another thing to add is just normalizing check-ins. So not always focusing on numbers or metrics or KPIs and targets. Like, KPIs being key performance indicators, but like, could you have check-ins with your managers where it's like, how are you today?
Yeah.
And is there any way that I could support you? And I think that will just take a lot of environments to the next level, because how many of us have been in positions where you're asked that question in a genuine way?
Yeah,
And
100%. Not much. Not much. And if anything, I think when you feel as though you're in a safe environment, that it's okay for you to not be okay, in some cases it might actually help your productivity, because this person actually cares about me. And so
right.
I'm willing to go the extra mile in order to repay, if you like, that feeling of safety, that feeling of it's okay some days that I'm not good, because on the days that I am good, I'm going to shoot the lights out.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. So it's all interlinked. And the more businesses understand that all of this works in your favor when it comes to a commercial aspect, the better.
Hmm.
The
Absolutely.
better. So yeah, who doesn't want to be working in an environment that's productive?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And
Yeah.
in your experience, what have been some barriers that you found that have prevented businesses from fully integrating maybe some of these mental health strategies we've spoken about, or even the diversity and inclusion into their strategies?
Yeah, I would say a few things. So the first being, sometimes it's a budget. It's a budget element, because sometimes when it comes to things like DEI, I know some businesses have adopted like a CV blind recruitment process,
Hmm.
and that may require some external softwares to invest in, for example, or training. And I appreciate that some businesses may not always have that budget to be able to do it. However, one thing that I would say on that is Rome wasn't built in a day. So how
Yes.
can you start small? It could be an education aspect. It could be a day's training to just really start to just plant those seeds and move, turn that needle or turn that wheel by just that 1%, right? Rather than having to think, okay, I need X amount of money in order to invest in this to completely transform or reform this. So that's another thing. I would also say a barrier is something that I outlined earlier. Some companies just feeling like the onus is literally on the employee,
Yeah.
like, or the staff to rectify, for example, all things mental health and well-being. And as a result, they're not embracing it at all. So it's about shifting that mindset. And that
Yeah.
really just feeds into that whole education piece. Like, it isn't just all about the employees. It's like, how can you also create an environment, create a culture that genuinely addresses all of these points to make it a better environment. So yeah, I would say those are definitely a few barriers. Another thing could be just the way the workforce operates. So, for example, like, is it an environment that is in person, like fully in person,
Hmm.
or is it a hybrid model? And the reason why I say that is because if we look at, for example, certain metrics like DEI, some people may not be able to embrace a fully in-person environment
Yeah. Yeah.
because of various different reasons. It could be accessibility reasons, or it could be just other factors, like, are they going through anxiety or social anxiety where they just literally can't be in an environment around people, and that could just deter even the talent coming in the first place. So that could be a recruitment issue. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I would touch on that point.
Okay. Okay. And then in terms of policies or initiatives, have you
Mm.
seen any that have made a proper difference in the workplace well-being that you can sort of touch on or mention to us?
Absolutely. And I hope every single employee or the world is listening to this, because I would really hope we'll see a world that will implement all of these. But yeah, yes, yeah. So the first one I would say is mental health pay time off. So literally having time where you could do all things that will feed into your mental health and well-being. And it's similar to a point I touched on earlier. Like, I've seen companies that literally have the Friday afternoons off to do
Mhm.
whatever you want, all things fun. If you want to get your nails done, go and do that. If you want to play football, in your case, go and do that. If you want to go to the cinema, go and do that. So like, just not having any restrictions on what you do, but what you're doing in that time is literally feeding into your mental health and well-being. And if you're getting paid, then I mean that's a win-win. And it's not to say that has to be a 20-day amount or a 28-day amount, similar to like the normal annual leave, but it's just giving a reasonable time off, or where it's dedicated to your mental health and well-being. So that's good. I would also say another thing that's really powerful is something called reverse mentoring. I don't know whether
I haven't heard of that before, no.
yeah, so it's almost as if, so obviously with mentoring, what we look at it is like someone who may be a few steps ahead, mentoring those who may be behind, right? But it's the opposite in that instant. So can those who may be, for lack of a better word, lower down, mentor those more senior? So educating, showing initiatives, because I mean, we're in a different age, day and age now, where even, for example, if you look at, for example, Gen Z, they may have different insights, knowledge that could support those who may be a few more years down the line. So it's about using that team and that power, and not just thinking, oh, because you're not as developed in your career, or you're not as advanced or further on in your career, you don't know anything. Actually, how can we twist that? Because it may be that person who could share insights to, I guess, C-suite individuals or the leadership team that could literally just give them that bit more knowledge. Because tackling this is not just about focusing on one set of people or one set of demographic, right? It's about embracing everyone and anyone to really support. So I would say those are the kind of things that I've seen that have been really, really positive overall.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I couldn't agree more. I think it's never a bad thing to have more ideas fed to you, right? So you've got a certain way of thinking based on your own experiences, but with this reverse mentoring, you've now got additional insights that you might not have considered previously, which who knows what type of differences they can make to your thinking. So that is a really, really good one. I like that.
Thank you.
I think people will appreciate that. But for some of our listeners, what advice would you give to young professionals, particularly women, who feel the pressure to do it all at the cost of their mental health?
Yeah. So for me, this is something that I'm really passionate about. And this is something I've had to learn. And the reason being was because once upon a time in my life, I was like a people pleaser. So yes was my favorite word. Like, yes. Yeah. I can make a whole song about saying yes. But what was it leading to? It was leading to committing to things that weren't aligned to my needs, and essentially pleasing other people at your detriment. So with that, how do you combat that? Is understanding and really embracing the power of no. Like getting used to that. And it sounds simple. It sounds really simple, but some people simply really struggle to say no because they don't want to like ruin a relationship
Apricots, yeah.
Right. They don't want to face those repercussions, and no is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's really not a bad thing. And you don't want to ever get to a point where you're saying yes so many times where you resent that individual, resent that company as a result. So it's really embracing that. And I think it could be a stereotype, but I know certainly as a woman, and for those women in my community, that saying no is difficult. It's really difficult. So it's that. I would also say, and this is something that I'm also learning, like learning how to really work with your energy levels. So, I mean, this may be a bit a bit insightful for yourself, but obviously women go through certain periods, certain cycles, like their menstrual cycle. And as a result, they may have peaks and troughs in terms of energy levels. So is there a point in your menstrual cycle where you literally feel weak, lethargic? Is that the very point you're going to choose to run a marathon? Is that the very point where you're going to choose to do one of the most difficult projects of your life? So is there a balance where you could really just listen to your body, follow those signals, and align that to your workload, or what you take on, right? And there may be certain periods where you may have to just call on your colleagues to support you with your capacity. And it's about workplaces also embracing that too.
Yeah.
And I know some women may go through issues like endometriosis, where they go through excruciating pain during their menstrual cycle. And it's about employers really understanding that. Like they may require like time off of work as a result of that, or just that ability to be accommodated in certain ways. So I would definitely say that. And I would also say learning that success is really something that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Like it really is a marathon and not a sprint. You don't have to burn yourself out in order
Yeah.
to get there. So take your time. Like women are known to really just sometimes overwork themselves, and that's counterproductive in the long run. So wherever you want to get to in life, whatever you want to get to in your career, take your time. And along that journey, in taking your time, you'll be able to really just have time to check in with yourself. Understand, are you going towards burnout? Because I've definitely been through a period of burnout in my life. And because I've just been go, 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 I almost like silenced the noise that my body was telling me, like slow down. So the more you realize that success is not a marathon, you don't need to rush, you don't need to overwork yourself, you don't need to burn yourself out to become successful, the more you'll be able to listen to your body if you need to rest, right? And just manage those expectations just generally.
Yeah. And I think there was a really important point that you mentioned there, is that listen to yourself, because, we've mentioned young professionals and women in particular, but I think this can be applied to anyone. Listen to yourself. And when you're not quite at the races and the energy levels are not there, rather listen to what your body's telling you, because in the long run, you'll be much better off than getting to a stage where there's burnout and then you're not as productive, even in the times where you're supposedly better off. And so I think that's a nice takeaway, is that listen to yourself, be kind to yourself. I think it goes back to what you said initially about checking in with yourself to make sure, can I actually take this on? The power of no. Geez, some really, really key takeaways that people can, apply to their own work experiences. I love that. And then in terms of the business side of things, in terms of the strategy side of things, how can business leaders measure whether their mental health and DEI initiatives are genuinely effective?
Yeah. I think one easy way is to look at retention of your staff. If, for me personally, and I don't know your view on this, but if I am ever looking at a business and they've got a high staff turnover, that's a red flag, because what is happening?
Yeah.
Why are people getting recruited and they're leaving within 0.5 seconds? Like that's definitely a red flag. So looking at your retention rate. I know even at Sift, like you guys definitely have a reputation of having team members who have, they're really well tenured in the business. So that is a good reflection of the culture, because we're now in a day and age where a lot of people are just not in the space where they're just accepting a paycheck. Like if taking a paycheck or taking money from a job is going to impact their mental health and well-being, there's a lot of people who now have the strength to walk away because it's now a priority. So looking at the retention rate is very much key in terms of that health and well-being aspect. I would also say in terms of the DEI way, can businesses start to look at promotion rates and zone in on that? So those who may be from underrepresented backgrounds, is there a way to look at how far or how quickly are they being promoted? Because that could also impact whether they'll stay, and it can feed into that whole retention element. And if you do find that there's a discrepancy there compared to, for example, their white counterparts, then that needs to be looked at and addressed. Because why is that the case? Is it because of performance? And if that's the case, then that's completely understandable. But if not, then it could be an unconscious bias thing. Then that needs to definitely be zoned in on and looked at. I would also say engagement surveys are very, very good. So it's similar to, like, for example, for me, having worked in customer success too, looking at NPS scores, right? So you will look at your client base. Can they give you feedback that you could feed in to the business and better whether it's the product or the service that you're offering? Now, the flip side with that will be looking at your team. Do they have a way to feedback how they're doing, or how they find the culture, how they find their leadership? And to add to that, I would say doing it in a way where it's safe. So is it anonymous?
Yeah.
And are there going to be negative repercussions, right? Like, you don't want people to be giving honest feedback and then before you realize they're on a performance plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, really taking that feedback on board and implementing those feedbacks and strategies, because honestly, like, the more you listen to your team, the better. Like, your team, your employees are the structure, they're the foundation of the business. So if they're saying we need better support, or if those from underrepresented backgrounds are really yearning for ERG groups or initiatives, take that on board.
Yeah.
And even if it's testing it out, then do that, right? So it's very, very important to factor that in. And obviously, utilizing mental health and wellbeing health resources. So that could be, for example, as I've outlined, like benefits. That could be another thing to factor in. But yeah, those are a few points that I'll mention on that.
Yeah, no, I really love that. And to be honest with you, I agree completely. Being a sports fan, always like to liken business experiences to sports. And you always want your team to be as happy, as content as can be for them to go and perform on the field, right? So, why would you be any different in the workplace? You want it to be a well-oiled, well-running machine. So, if there's active steps that you can take to make that, a better environment, if there's anything that you can do to improve that, you would do it as well. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
And just another point to add. So yeah, I completely agree with the mental health initiatives, or for example, the benefits, like looking at whether the team are actually adopting it or utilizing it, and looking at the metrics of that, because I appreciate if you're giving mental health paid time leave off, right, and the team aren't utilizing it, then that could be a waste of spend. Or if you're giving Fridays off and people are just like overworking or doing extra hours, and there's no point. But if you analyze and zone in on the stats and the metrics and the data around that, then you can find that if there's an uptake of all of these mental health initiatives, then that's a win-win. And you've really got to listen and keep those things in place.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said earlier. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So you take all of these little bits and pieces on board and then implement them 100%. Okay, Miriam, before we jump off and end today's podcast, which I must say I've enjoyed massively, I do just want to, give you a couple quick fire questions for you to answer. So, what's one piece of software besides Sift or Xero, we're being impartial here, that you can't live without?
Notion.
No.
Notion organizes my whole life.
Agreed completely. And then, what's the best book/podcast, us being on a podcast, that you've read or listened to lately?
The Memo by Minda Harts. So for women in the corporate space, that is one to read for sure.
Perfect.
Especially
Memo.
black women. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned about building a business?
You are the average of the 2 to 5 people that you're around. So your network is literally your net worth.
Oh, it's a powerful one. I love that. And then just lastly, if there was one thing that you wanted listeners to take away from today's podcast, what would it be?
So we've spoken about mental health and well-being and DEI. It is not a nice to have. It is a necessity. And the more businesses start to remove funding in these spaces and detract from that, the more it will start to impact things like retention, staff satisfaction, innovation, productivity, profitability. All of these factors, it's all interlinked. So that's something to be mindful of. It's not a nice to have, it is an essential, a necessity.
Well, I don't think we could have ended off anywhere better than that. So Miriam, thank you so much for joining us today on Beyond Insights. I think there's lots of nice key takeaways that people can gain from that. And I really hope that people take what you've said on board, because it's a super important topic in today's day and age, like we said earlier.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Insights podcast.
Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to right now.
And please share with any of your colleagues or friends or family members that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast.
That's all from us. Until next time, see you then.